Today's episode is one of the most powerful and complex conversations we have had on the common thread. My guest, LaRell Herbert, spent most of his life feeling like he had been born into the wrong body. After discovering the concept of being transgender in his 20s, he began a journey that eventually led him to transition, take hormones, and undergo gender reassignment surgery. For 7 years, he lived as a woman. But then, in a single afternoon, everything changed. LaRell describes the moment of realization that shattered the identity he had built his life around, forcing him to confront trauma from his childhood, the impact on his marriage, and the permanent consequences of the decisions he had made. Today, he uses his story to help others think more deeply about identity, healing, and the powerful ways our past can shape who we believe we are. This is a raw, courageous, and deeply human conversation you do not want to miss. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Common Thread. I am your host, Scott Stone, and I am here today with a very special guest, LaRell Herbert. LaRell and I met in a men's group that we found online, and I very quickly got to learn a little something about LaRell that was different than every other man in that group, and it was instantly piqued my curiosity. And he had such a level of courage and bravery to share his story and walk his path that I just had to have him on the show. And without further ado, LaRell, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scott. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man, it's so good to see you. We spent months and months in this men's group container, and I had the privilege of sitting in the same ship with you and getting to know you on a personal level and the path you walked. And I just say it's such an atypical path, but it seems in society more and more something that's becoming more and more talked about, more and more common, more and more mainstream. And so I just really appreciate your bravery, your courage, your willingness to come on the show today and just share your story.
Yeah, I'm happy to share it for all the benefit that it can offer others, the warning, the information, uh, anything that anybody might be curious about.
Yeah. Yeah, so the thing that I learned about LaRell pretty early on is that LaRell had transitioned to a female gender, and at some point in that transition realized he had made, I guess, what you would call a mistake, and had detransitioned back to being a man. And LaRell, could you just start by telling us a bit about what that means, what that looks like, and yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, so I, like many out there, especially in today's day and age, fell into this idea that it was possible to have been born into the wrong body because of the things I was experiencing, the way I felt as I grew up. I felt myself drawn towards female clothing, female things. I literally, for much of my life, felt like perhaps God made a mistake if there was a God. I grew up believing in God and believed he must have made a mistake. And I believed that I was supposed to be born a female. So then when I was in my mid 20s and I learned that trans was a thing, because I lived most of my life thinking I was the only freak on the whole planet that felt like he was in the wrong body. I had nothing to make sense of it from, no explanation for what I was experiencing. All I knew was my experience, that I felt like I was possibly in the wrong body. And so then in my 20s, when I was exposed to the concept of transgender, I thought I finally had an answer for what I was experiencing all along. And so then I started researching more about it because I just figured there was nothing I could do about it. Just had to live my whole life this way. And I just was living as a man, but feeling in many ways very uncomfortable with that experience. And so when I found out that there was such thing as opposite sex hormones you could take that would change your body, and surgeries a person could have to make their body more aligned with the gender they identified with or felt they were. And so I pursued that. But Yeah, and then I don't know how detailed we want to get into it yet. As we go along in the conversation, I'm sure we'll talk about a lot more. But yes, ultimately, after living as a woman for 6 years, no, for 7 years, I had an experience one afternoon where all of a sudden the whole concept disintegrated in my mind, where I realized I made a horrific mistake having the surgery to remove my male genitalia and convert it to what was supposed to resemble female genitalia to make me feel better in my body. I suddenly woke up one afternoon and realized, what did I do to myself? I am a man. I always have been a man and always will be a man. There's nothing I can do about that. And and then having had the surgery already, having destroyed my body in ways, having robbed from myself the ability to have intimate relations with my wife in the way a man normally can with a woman, having robbed myself the ability to even stand up to pee, and robbed myself and my wife from the ability of ever being able to have kids together. It it brings on a horrific kind of grief that I would not wish on anybody. And it's a kind of grief that has caused me to become so fueled to become an advocate for mental healing before you ever pursue any kind of hormones or surgery for such an identity that I know now forms in a person through experience, through trauma, that it is not something a person is born with. And it's really tragic for me to see so many young people pursue this path thinking it is the right path for them when it is only because of the experience they had up to that point in their life, or the things they were exposed to on the internet or from their friends and TV and such, that caused them to think this was the right path to go. So having this experience that I had going through all of this, I am so adamant about helping kids and adults to recognize what causes this sense of self in them, and that it is not something you should go destroying your body over.
Hmm. Yeah, wow, what a realization to just wake up and have that knowing, not belief, not thought, but just like internal knowing of like this is who I am and this is what happened. And you said something earlier about, we're not born that way, that we happen to take that on through experiences and trauma. What was Laurel's version of that growing up, where that started to form and create that identity?
Uh, a few things. I try. I've made the mistake a few times of saying things about my mom, and she's still alive, and she's seen and heard the things I've said, and I don't want to hurt her. But the reality is that I grew up in a household, in a childhood home, where my mother and my grandma were very anti-man and very anti-male genitalia. I don't think it's very normal for a kid to grow up hearing about how disgusting penises are all the time, for example. But I did. That was my childhood growing up, that penises are just gross, they're disgusting. My mom would come up with weird nicknames for my dad's penis, and my mom and her mom, my grandma, would get together quite often on the phone and be talking to each other about my grandpa and talking negatively about my dad and just men in general, that men are disgusting, men are gross. And so that's one thing that I've identified, that as I was growing up, I couldn't be a man. I couldn't be a boy. And another thing that was male animals. My mom was always anti-male animals in our house. She said they were gross, they peed on things. We are not having any male animals, we're only having female animals. And so there's those two things that caused me to develop this belief that females were superior. And then I'm pretty sure, I mean, I had this repressed memory that came up one time when I was using psychedelic mushrooms, actually. And I still to this day don't know what to make of it. But when I was 5 years old, this memory from when I was 5 years old surfaced that I had blocked out, and I'm pretty sure that I was tied up with an extension cord or some sort of cord and sexually violated by a teenage boy. And this was something, it's the only thing that explains a lot of the things that I experienced when I was growing up. The and I remembered someone at some point telling me that I would be better as a girl or that I should be a girl or something. There the fascinating thing with childhood memories is when you're a child, you don't perceive things nearly the same as you do as an adult. So when these things happen to you as kids or as a child, you just don't quite understand what's going on, and it can form your sense of self in the world. And I'm pretty sure that's what happened to me as a kid. And I for for whatever reason, because of these experiences, I gravitated towards feeling like I was safer to be a girl. And then as that continued in my mind, it developed a sense of identity around that I was supposed to be a girl. I still don't fully understand why I personally developed that, but there are these many different circumstances from my past that I can look back on and say, well, yeah, that really makes sense that that would have triggered that in me.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and so as you started to get older into your teenage years, I remember having a conversation once where you alluded to women's clothes and cross-dressing, and so was that the natural progression of moving towards feeling more and more feminine and exploring what that felt like in your body?
Yes. Yeah, I there's this thing called autogynephilia, which a lot of trans identifying men who think they're women, it starts out with being sexually aroused by putting on women's clothing or thinking of oneself as a woman. That's what autogynephilia is to sexualize the thought of yourself as being a woman. And I used to think that was not my experience, and I denied that that was anywhere close to what my experience was. But the more I watched these other men who struggled with autogynephilia, which then turned into transgender and them living as a woman, I realized that what happened in me is I did have this certain sexual tendency towards female clothing. When I would put it on as a teenager, it it excited me. And I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know to how to make sense of that my body gets sexually aroused by wearing female clothing, and together with me feeling like I would be better to be a girl because of the other experiences I had as a kid. That then, as I continued to wear the women's clothing and experience those feelings that would be excited in it over the years, it did cause me to develop an identity in it. And And most trans people will adamantly say that I knew since I was 3 or 4 years old. It's typically 4 years old, but that they'll say is since 4 years old, I knew I was in the wrong body. I knew I was a girl. And I feel like I kind of had this. I've said many times that that was my experience too, because I feel like that was about when that happened. But the reality was it's about 4 years old when you recognize that there's a difference between boys and girls.
Hmm.
And so I'm not sure what you would call it, like a retro formed identity, whereas where when you're in your teenage years and you start being excited by putting on female clothing, then all of a sudden it makes it easy for your mind to identify, well, yeah, I felt that way since I was 4, so I must be trans. I'm in the wrong body because this is how I've felt since then.
Hmm. And let's talk time frame, right? So how old are when were you born?
1980.
1980. So from all I can recollect, in 1995, we'll call it, you're 15. Transgenderism is still a pretty new conversation.
Right.
Where did you discover that? How did you become aware of these terminologies and these possibilities?
That was the craziest part. I It was in 95 when my family got our first computer and the internet, and I wanted to know what this was that I was experiencing. And so I can't tell you the number of times I typed into a search engine online, why do I feel like a girl? Why do I feel like I'm in the wrong body? I literally thought I, I was so confused by what I was experiencing and I wanted answers. And so I kept searching for that, but I would never find anything. And I can't believe it because I've always been able to find just about anything on the internet.
Hmm.
But it wasn't until, let's see, like 2005 or 6 or so when I was in my mid 20s that I was sitting there at the computer and I again was struggling with these thoughts and wondering what do I do with this? Because I just kept trying to suppress it, keep I discovered that as long as I kept myself constantly busy, which was one of the reasons I started working on trucks so much, because as long as I was working on trucks or manly things, I felt okay. But the instant I would stop, all of a sudden those feelings would come flooding back in me. And so in like 2005 or 6, I searched again. Why do I feel like I'm a girl in a man's body or something like to that effect? And all of a sudden, finally, this internet forum called Susan's Place popped up. And I spent hours on that internet forum reading all these stories that resembled my own for the first time in my life, where I felt like I finally have an answer for what I'm experiencing, and I'm not alone in the world. Like I said, I thought I was the only person on the whole planet that felt this way because I had never seen such a thing. I knew drag queens existed. I
Hmm.
saw drag queens a lot, but I knew they were just men that liked dressing up as women. And I said, that's not what I am. I
Hmm.
literally feel like I'm in the wrong body here.
Hmm. Wow, yeah, the internet. Whew. It's such malleable ages. We have no idea what this information being portrayed to us really is and the level to which we could interpret it as truth because it's just, well, it's on a website and I'm accessing it just like a book at the library. You mentioned before that you were raised Mormon. What extent did religion play into this as well?
I so so in the Mormon church, you are taught that you were created as the person you're going to be on the earth before you even came to the earth. Like I was created as LaRell in the pre-existence as a male, and that meant that I was put here on the earth as a male, and that when I die, I will go to the afterlife also as a male, and then be a male for all of eternity. And growing up with that, it really confused me because I thought, how could that possibly be that I could live my entire life not getting to or that I would live for eternity, not just this life, but live for eternity as a male. And here I'm struggling with these feelings that I was born in the wrong body and that I should be a female. I had all these desires to be a mother and things. And I thought, what the? what a tragedy, what an injustice to be stuck in this male body for all of eternity. And I haven't entirely identified what in the Mormon church may have caused my gender identity to differ from my birth sex, but that alone caused me to want to fight that concept that I could possibly be trapped in this experience for all of eternity. It just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I can only imagine the permanence of it of like, yeah, this is what you are and you are going to be this forever and for as long as you can remember, you felt like you shouldn't be in this thing, so get used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so now you're 25, you find Susan's place, you start exploring these conversations of other people like yourself, and I'm guessing you start to form or notice the gender identity versus the biological sex male aspect of you. So where do we go from there?
From there, as soon as, once I learned that it was possible to transition, I guess, I started researching. I lived up outside of Portland, Oregon at the time, and I started looking for perhaps a therapist I could go to that would help me with this process because I knew that was one of the first steps that you had to go see a therapist that would confirm that you were indeed trans, and then the therapist would prescribe you hormones, and you'd be on hormones for a couple of years, experience those changes, and then you could pursue surgery. And I was in such a masculine man body at the time that I thought about trying to pursue that, but I just thought there's no chance. I am trapped in this experience. I'm a man. I'll never be able to pass as a woman. I'll never No one will ever think I'm a woman no matter how many surgeries or hormones I take. So might as well just stick it out and live as a man. And I thought perhaps if I find a woman to be in a relationship with, if I get married, maybe that's what I really need. So I spent a tremendous amount of time on singles websites looking for someone to date. And I did find someone there in Oregon to date and got engaged to her after just 3 months. She was also Mormon, and that's a fairly normal engage time to know someone before you become engaged as a Mormon. And then uh, a short time after becoming engaged with her, she broke up with me. So then I found myself single again struggling with these feelings of being in the wrong body, and being with her didn't make the feelings go away. And so then I met my current wife, who lived in Colorado at the time. We met online and started talking, and I'd come out to visit her, and eventually I moved out to Colorado to be with her. And then we got engaged, and we had a wedding date, and we were sitting on the couch one night together in our house here in Colorado, and this TV show came on called Gender Revolution. It was a National Geographic, well, there was a National Geographic magazine article that went along with the show, but this show was about trans people like Jazz Jennings, who was a famous trans person, and there was an older couple on the show that the husband had transitioned to live as a woman and that they were happily married together. And so my wife paused the show. She knew that I liked to wear women's clothing. She had even bought me women's clothing to wear because she wanted to be supportive of that. She grew up around queer people, and just she loved me, and she thought this is just something he likes to do at home. So I'll buy him skirts and things to wear at home. And I did quite often, and it felt amazing to me wanting to wear women's clothing and to finally get to do it just around my wife or my soon to be wife. But anyway, we're sitting there, that show comes on, and she turns to me and she asks me, is that what you want? Is that what the skirt wearing is about? Do you actually want to be a woman? Do you want to have surgery to make your body like a woman? And I felt this huge wave of relief come over me because this was a secret I was keeping from her.
Hmm.
I had never told her this. Like I said, she knew I liked to wear skirts, but she did not know the full extent of what my secret was.
Hmm.
And so I said to her, yes, I actually do. That is absolutely what I want. I want to live as a woman because I feel like I am one. And like I said, we were engaged and had a wedding date coming up very soon when I told her this. And you can imagine it absolutely rocked her world. Because while she was okay with me wearing skirts around the house, being or becoming a woman was an entirely different thing,
Hmm.
not something she was ready for.
Yeah. So what came first, the surgery or the marriage?
The marriage, it ended up being another few years till I had the surgery, but only 1 year. We were married in September of 2016, and this was, I think, in it was earlier in 2016 that we had this conversation. And so
Hmm.
we still got married in 2016 in
Hmm.
September, but after a lot of pretty sure we went to some therapists and tried to work things out. And I think maybe she was in denial, hoping it wouldn't ever actually happen.
Hmm.
And perhaps maybe I might have told her that it's okay, I'm not going to do it. But then in 2017, the very next year, I sought out a gender therapist that I knew. I specifically found a therapist that I knew identified as trans herself because I didn't want a therapist trying to convince me that I was wrong. I felt like I knew what I wanted.
Hmm.
This is the path I want to take, and I just need you to sign the letter so I can get those hormones, so
Hmm.
I can get the surgery. So in 2017, after seeing this therapist for a while, and she, of course, confirmed that I was trans and happily wrote the letter for me. So I began taking female hormones in it's like July of June or July of 2017 and continued to live as a man for a while out in public while I was taking them until they started to make changes to my body. My breast tissue started to grow and my face started to get a little thinner. My body hair totally thinned out. All that I used to have a whole bunch of chest hair, had a bush of chest hair on my chest, and that just went away almost completely
Wow.
while being on the female hormones and testosterone blocker. And I thought it was amazing at the time because I thought this is exactly what I want. Because you remember back when I first discovered what being trans was and that transition was a thing, I thought there was no way in hell I could ever actually look feminine. But after taking those hormones for a while, I did see a possibility and I had also arrived at a place where I thought it doesn't really matter if I can pass or not, as long as I feel good about myself out in public. People are going to stare, people are going to look at me and know I'm a man, but as long as I feel good about myself, that's what matters most.
Hmm. Okay, so 2016, so now you're 20 or 2017, so you're 27. Or no, yes, 27. No, 37.
30, yeah.
Let's see, 37, and you start taking hormone blockers, estrogen, all that, and then how much longer later until you got the actual reassignment surgery?
That was July 9th of 2019.
Okay,
So I was required by law to be on female hormones for 2 years and living full time as a woman for 2 years, I think. Might have been 1 year before they would even do the surgery. I guess they want to make sure you're sure of it, that you know what you're doing.
right.
So yeah, in 2019, July 2019, I had the surgery at Denver Health in Denver, Colorado.
Got it.
And and one of the craziest things is I was required to see a psychologist before the surgery, an actual licensed psychologist who was supposed to make the final determination that I was indeed trans and therefore eligible for the surgery. And this was a Kaiser Permanente appointed psychologist. And I walk into the office and sit down and realize I'm sitting across the table from another trans person. This was a man who thought he was a woman. And he's the one who is writing the letter saying, yes, LaRell is transgender and needs this surgery.
Interesting.
And yeah,
It's a very convenient advocate for you.
yes.
So, did you do top and bottom surgery at the same time?
I never did top surgery because, for one, I grew up with the condition they call gynecomastia, where my breasts were fairly enlarged already. And so when I took the female hormones, they just kind of filled out, and I was happy with them. I didn't feel any need to have top surgery.
Yep,
So just the bottom surgery happened.
got it. And so, what does that entail and cost and all that?
Let's see. I think at the time it was, what did I think I stayed 2 nights in the hospital and it was $40,000, I believe. But my Kaiser insurance paid for all but 6,000 of that. So I ended up paying for 6,000 of the $40,000 surgery.
Kaiser being state funded Medicaid
It's,
or some sort of insurance, like,
yeah, it was my private,
okay,
my
private.
insurance that I paid for.
Wow, they covered that. That's incredible. And how is that the case? I mean, it's a cosmetic. I mean, maybe it's not cosmetic after all the letters and recommendations and whatnot, but how is that covered?
See, this is the wild thing because normally most people would consider that a cosmetic surgery. Any other surgery would be considered cosmetic, but because the mental health system has successfully convinced the world that transgenderism is a legitimate identity and not just a mental illness, then they're able to say the insurance companies have to pay for this because it's in the person's best interest, almost as if it's a healing surgery, like
Like a
like
tumor
removing
removal or
a
something.
tumor, yeah. Like literally the penis is seen as a growth that shouldn't be there, as if it's a tumor that needs to be removed, and that's how they justify it. And that's one of the things that is so disturbing about it that I am that's one of the reasons I'm so advocate or so adamant that state funding should not be funding these and insurance, period, because it, or the medical system at all, it should be funding what should be a cosmetic surgery.
Right. Wow. So 2 days in the hospital, They completely remove your penis and then they build a vagina in its place.
Yes, they cut the penis off, turn it inside out, and cut an opening and put the penis turned inside out inward to make the vaginal canal. That's how they did mine. They do it different ways. Sometimes they'll take a section of your lower colon and turn that into the vaginal canal. But for me, they used my penis, and my penis was already fairly small. I had always had, I was always self-conscious about the size of my penis as it was. And so when they tried to use my small penis to make a vaginal canal, it ended up being so small and so tight that they send you home with these dilators that are varying sizes. They increase in size, and you're supposed to shove that thing in there to keep the opening open. And it hurt like hell. It was one of the most painful things I'd ever experienced, even more painful than the surgery it was itself, trying to keep that stupid thing open. But because I identified at the time as a woman and wanted to have the vagina, that was the whole point of having the surgery, was to have a usable vagina like a woman does, so I could feel in every way like I was legitimately a woman. And so I wanted that thing open. So I tried and tried to keep it dilated, but because it hurt so bad, and I'd go back up to the hospital and tell them I cannot do this. This hurts too bad. Is there anything you can do? And they're like, nope, you just got to keep trying, keep stretching it out, and eventually it'll. I believe you have to basically stretch it out for ever for the rest of your life in order to keep it open. Otherwise, it atrophies, it shrinks, and eventually I just could not do it anymore, and it closed off to where there's just a tiny little opening there that you can't get anything in there at all. But it still excretes fluids, and it's disgusting now. And this happened while I was still identifying as a woman, so it was really weird to no longer have my penis, but to also not have a vagina like I wanted. And
Mhm.
I even contacted the hospital again because I was like, you guys need to fix this. What can we do about this? And then my wife got freaked out about that. I can't believe you're going to have another surgery, because I wanted to have the working vagina because I felt like it was what I needed on my body because I was a woman.
Mhm.
And it was it was very shortly after that, when I was trying to pursue that, that I luckily came to my senses and woke up from this whole nightmare. Well, I'll never wake up from the nightmare of having done what I did to myself, but
Mhm.
at least I recognized I was living a lie.
Yeah. So they transition like your genitalia to a female. Did you have, I guess you could say, did you have sensation in it? Obviously, you can't just go have a child. You don't have a uterus or ovaries and all that. But like, to what extent? What does it mean to have a working vagina then? Like, do you like? Yeah, what does that mean?
I guess to me at the time, I wanted to be able to be penetrated like a woman can.
Yeah.
And that was what, like, I wanted the sensation, the ability to reach orgasm, and to be penetrated. And I luckily can reach orgasm. It's quite a challenge. It's a lot more difficult than it used to be, but that I can do, and that's amazing because some people who go through this surgery lose that ability altogether and can't orgasm, and I can't imagine that. So I'm very blessed that I was able to retain that however the surgeons constructed it to take the nerves out of the penis and realign them down there, they were able to do it in a way that I could still orgasm. But yeah, the because I couldn't be penetrated, it felt like, well, what is this? This is, I just kind of have this weird looking butchered. It basically looked like someone just hacked my penis off and just kind of sewed the skin back together. I was never happy with how it looked. I was okay with how it felt, but it definitely was not what I was anticipating.
Hmm. Yeah. So what becomes the outfall of that surgery on your marriage?
Um, it's been nine years since then, and yeah, it's still a huge tragedy. We've been learning how to heal from it, but my wife, of course, wanted to be supporting and loving, and she accepted that this was my reality, that I was born in the wrong body, and therefore the surgery was fixing something that never should have happened in the first place. So she was supportive and went along with it, but inside it absolutely devastated her. And I still remember the night before surgery, she wanted to make love to me one last time, and we did. And it was the weirdest experience knowing that that was the last time we were going to be able to do that. But it wasn't enough to stop me from going forward with it the next day. I for years, well, for the whole time I was with my wife before this, trying to make love with her was very difficult as it was with a penis when I felt like I shouldn't have one. So every time I made love to her, the only way I could have an orgasm is to imagine that what I was feeling was myself being penetrated when I was actually penetrating her.
Hmm.
I had to put myself in my mind in a different place. And so already sex was very difficult for me at the time, even with my penis. But then the incredibly painful, complicated thing was after surgery, no longer having a penis. Now I had this weird place where now we both have female parts, kind of, but mine didn't quite work the way I wanted it to because it had closed off. It was very difficult for me to reach orgasm. Still, the only way I could reach orgasm was to think of myself as a woman, which that was the whole reason I went through the whole thing is because I felt like I was. And so I was just put myself in that place. And so anyway, yes, it had an absolutely devastating effect on my marriage. Devastating. I ended up sleeping in the basement for like a couple months for a while because it was just too much. It caused a lot of marriage issues between us. My poor wife was devastated to no longer have that part of me and to be able to connect with me that way. It's it's been that kind of grief when you realize what you took from your partner. That's one of the hardest parts because laying aside what I took from myself, but knowing that I did this to her, that I robbed from her the ability for her to ever have kids again, as long as she's with me, unless she does with someone else, and robbing from her that intimate connection that you can only get with your husband and his male genitalia. And it's been tragic.
Hmm. Yeah. So that was 9 years ago that you went through with that surgery, July 9th of 2017. And when did you have this wake up moment from this fever dream and realize that you had made a mistake?
It was okay. So yeah, I continued living as a woman and everything. I thought things were mostly great other than a vagina not being what I wanted it to be. And so in October 23rd of 2024, no, 2023. Yeah, because it's been more than 2 years ago. 3, 4, 20. Yeah, October 23rd, 2023. I was at this time I had come to the realization that regardless of what my mental state was, the reality was that I was born in a male body. So I recognized my body was born male, and therefore I recognized that it needed testosterone, even though I still identified as a woman and was living as a woman. So I found this place that would give me a little bit of testosterone along with my estrogen because I knew that my body needed the testosterone. And this was the weirdest thing. As soon as that testosterone hit my system, it was like it was almost like my mind suddenly was able to identify just enough with that, wait a minute, you are a man, and I felt the testosterone in my body, and I felt that the man parts of me come alive again. It's hard to explain, but that happened, and so then I decided to do some psychedelic mushrooms like I had done many, many times, even while I was in my trans identity, and all it ever did was was confirm to me that I had done the right thing, that I was legitimately supposed to be a woman. But this time, with the little bit of testosterone in me, and I took those mushrooms, and I had this crazy experience where it was like the testosterone was speaking to me. And I suddenly realized I also had this awareness that, and I still didn't believe in God at this time, really. I had grown up believing in God, but I had become atheist, and then through all my psychedelic mushroom use, I had determined that basically I was God, just like anyone else is God. We all have connection to universal consciousness and all that. But in this experience, I suddenly had this realization that, wait a minute, there is a pattern of creation. There is a reason that flowers form the way they do. There is a reason that there's male and female. And in one afternoon, all of a sudden, all of my decisions to take female hormones and have the surgery and live as a woman out in public and all this stuff and rob this from my wife, in one afternoon, all of a sudden, it just completely disintegrated in my mind as I realized there was a reason that male and female exists. There was the fact that I was born male meant that I was supposed to be male. And all of these thoughts that I was female or born in the wrong body was actually driven by experience. And I was able to remember the experiences that caused me to develop that sense of self. And it just fell apart. It was crazy.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. The veil, the veil falls, and all of a sudden, the last 7 years become, or well, I guess the last, 3 decades or so of just like, wait a second, now what?
Yes.
So what does that look like? What you like, okay, so you do some psychedelic mushrooms, you realize that you made a mistake and that you're actually a man born in a man's body and supposed to be a man. You've already went through the surgery. Now what?
My wife came home and I told her, I've got something I got to tell you. And so we went on a walk. The weather was pretty decent that day. It was a fairly warm evening, and we went on a long walk here in Colorado Springs. And I told her what I experienced. And I told her that I came to the realization that I need to go back to living as a man. I can't live this lie anymore. I realized that it was a lie that I was living this whole time. And the surgery and everything never should have happened. I should have continued to live as a man. And now despite having gone through all this, I have to go back to living as a man. And this rocked her world more than the first time did, because now she's also having her own realization of all that she lost for nothing. That
Mm,
I brought her through all of this just to undo it, just to undo what cannot be undone, just to try to go back to living as a man after having brought us through all of that. It devastated her. I mean, there was parts of her that were happy, of course, because she was finally going to get her husband back and finally going to be able to feel safe out in public again. Because there were a lot of times where she did not feel safe being out in public with me. Some of the places we'd go and the looks we'd get. And I feel really bad for that too, for possibly for the potential of bringing harm upon my family because of my mental delusion that I was going through.
mhm.
And so yeah, I told her that I needed to go back to living as a man, and then she asked, so what does that mean? How soon? When are you going to do that? And I was like, well, tomorrow. I can't, like right now, I can't live this lie anymore.
Mm,
But I don't think she was quite ready yet for me to suddenly go back to living as a man. So the next day when I got up, I usually I would go work on my laptop at a local coffee shop and even as my trans self in my woman clothes all the time, and so I was going to go back to work that next day in the same coffee shop, and I stood there looking at my clothes, and I didn't really have any men's clothes anymore. All I had was my dresses. And so I went ahead and put my wig and my dress on and went to work that day. And it felt really weird. It was the very first time that I'd been out in public where I felt like a man wearing a dress. It was so uncomfortable that I couldn't really make myself work much on my computer, and I ended up actually going out and recording a video telling my Facebook friends and Instagram followers and things what happened, that I came to this realization, and I'm going to be going back to living as a man. I'm not exactly sure when yet, but very, very soon.
mm.
But I'm pretty sure it was the next day that I put on male clothes and did not put my wig on. And of course, there were a bunch of people that knew me. And when I went back to the same coffee shop, they're like, "Rel, where's your wig? What's going on?"
Wow.
I told them, well, I realized I was living a lie, and this is who I really am, and I'm back.
Wow.
And most of them didn't know me as a man. I moved here to Colorado as a man, but I had only lived here just 2 years before becoming my female self. So most everyone I knew here only knew me as the woman self, or the trying to be woman self.
Wow.
So that was really weird for a lot of them.
Yeah. So that transitioning process after this realization looks like switching like off hormones. Obviously, you haven't done the corrective surgery, but what, yeah, you go buy a bunch of dudes' clothes. Life as we know it is back to LaRell as a dude.
Yeah, but it's weird to go from living as a woman for 7 years to suddenly trying to go back as a man. For one, I've my head felt so naked.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't not wear a hat for months because not having something on my head felt so wrong after wearing a wig for so long. Although there were parts of me that were so happy to not have to wear those stupid wigs anymore. That is so uncomfortable, such a pain in the butt.
Did you have to like catch yourself in the bathroom, like walk into the right bathroom, like just all the little comforts of your identity?
Yes, yes, absolutely. There were so many times where I almost walked into the wrong restroom because I was using the women's restrooms full time for that whole time because that
Hmm.
was just what felt right.
Right.
So yeah, having to learn how to walk into the right bathroom now. I had to re-buy all my clothes. I had got rid of all my men's clothes, so that was quite the expense to have to buy all new clothes. There was a lot of thrift store shopping because I couldn't really buy a whole new wardrobe of new clothes. It was too expensive.
Hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, another all my social media profile pictures and things that I had to go through and change. Luckily, I never changed my name. I always used the same name because for most of my life, everybody thought the name LaRell was a girl's name anyway,
Mm.
which could have played into part of the identity issue,
Hmm.
being called a girl's name my whole life.
Hmm.
So, so I didn't have to change my name. My passport still to this day has my female picture and says I'm a female because I haven't gone through the
Wow. What is
trouble of
that like going to
expense.
the fucking airport and being like, here you go, being like, what?
Yeah, luckily I haven't traveled anywhere yet.
Got
I
it.
plan to fix that before I attempt to travel because that would be weird. My driver's license, when I went to the DMV to have my driver's license changed to female and have my female picture, I had to bring a letter to to tell them that a therapist declared that I was indeed female. But when I went back to change it back to male, I'm sitting there looking like I do now, and I'm telling her I need to fix this, fix my driver's license to say I'm male again. And she looked at me and said, I'm going to need a letter from a doctor or therapist that says you're male. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Look at me. I am obviously male. I was born male. It's like, say, well, let me go check with someone. She went and checked with some other person at the DMV, and then she came back and said, "Okay, yeah, we're gonna change it for you." It's like you bet.
Yeah, you're damn right. Wow. Okay, so you transition back to male, you start living as a male again, you get all new clothes, all that. When's the advocacy come online?
Pretty quickly afterwards. I because because all of a sudden when that happened to me, and I realized that it was possible to be so convinced. I I I've spent a lot of time around other trans identifying people while I was living that way. I was exposed to all of these people living their life as their trans self, thinking they were born that way. So I knew the mentality behind it. I knew what I've experienced, and I also was exposed to all of their experiences and their stories and hearing from them and knowing what they were going through. I say that because some people like to tell me, well, what was your experience doesn't necessarily mean that it's true for everyone else. So you should just keep your opinions to
Right,
yourself.
right.
But but along with my awakening, I also took some training in Dr. Richard Schwartz's parts work, internal family systems,
Yep.
and that actually played a big role in my waking up as well because when I was taking the training, for one, it exposed me to what causes different parts of ourselves and our different parts of our identity to form.
Hmm.
And while I was taking the training, one of the other students asked the instructor, "So what about being trans? Is being trans a part?" And I started listening very intently. I'm like, what is she going to say in
Right.
response to that? Because we've got the whole world saying that trans is literally an identity that you're born with.
Mhm.
And if trans is a part, then that means that it was formed in experience. And so I'm sitting there, okay, what is she gonna say? And she said, well, I personally don't think being trans is a part, but Dr. Richard Schwartz, the creator of internal family systems, does indeed think it's a part. And I had never heard that before, that
Wow.
Dr. Schwartz legitimately believes being trans is something formed in experience. And when I heard that, my that kind of rocked my world because I'm sitting there as a trans person fully identifying as a woman who thinks I was born that way. I honestly thought I was born that way. I felt like I was born that way. I made videos on YouTube claiming I was born this way. And so when I detransitioned and realized that I was living a lie, I had this sudden awareness that I honestly believed, and I believe to this day, that every trans identifying person is only that way because of experience, that it only forms an experience, that you are not born that way. I do not believe that any trans identifying person is born with that identity.
Hmm.
I believe that it forms an experience. And so as soon as I realized that, right after I came to the awareness myself, I kind of laid low for a while because I went through this experience of feeling a lot of shame and lack of confidence in myself because I was like, who is ever going to believe me? Who's ever going to trust me to do anything, to run business, to make business decisions, to make any decisions in life if I've done this to myself? I've made such a horrid mistake in my life. And so I, for quite some time after that, after I detransitioned, I just felt horrific shame, grief, guilt. I So yeah, my advocacy thoughts started right afterwards, but I wasn't about to start advocating until I kind of settled into what this meant for me. But it was fairly soon afterwards that I was like, okay, I have got to make people aware. I cannot let anybody go through what I went through again, thinking that it's the right thing for them. And it's the most painful thing for me to watch when someone who identifies as trans is about to have the surgery. That I sit there and I watch in horror, knowing what I went through, thinking it was the absolute right thing, and knowing the reality that there is a very good chance that in about 6 or 7 years, that's generally what it ends up being, is about what it was for me, and I've watched it happen in many other trans identifying people. About 6 or 7 years later is when it hits them, and they say, oh shit, what did I do? I never should have done that. And they go back to living as their birth sex. And knowing that and having watched that happen so many times, that's what fuels my desire to make people aware of this, to make people aware that this is something that can feel so right and so real. You can think it is absolutely your reality, absolutely something you need to pursue surgery and hormones and living that way for. But it can turn out that it was actually formed in experience and trauma, and therefore you are likely to awake from it one day having made permanent, irreversible, destructive changes to your body.
Hmm. Is there where do we stand medically now? Can you transition back to a male genitalia?
No, sadly, surgeries just have not. I mean, there are definitely surgeries that can create a penis on a person,
Hmm.
but it is so it's such a horrific surgery that going from male to female, creating a neo vagina is way easier than attempting to create a neo penis.
Hmm.
And they just have not managed to figure that one out quite yet. They have to do things like put this little air pump in your hip that you have to pump up every time you want to get hard,
Oh wow.
and that that freaks me out, the thought of having these air hoses and an air pump inside my body that I have to to pump it. Believe me, the thought has crossed my mind. Is there any surgery, any way I could surgically replace this and have my penis again and be able to stand up to pee again and make love to my wife? But it's just not there yet.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I have no doubt with the way technology is and things, and I've heard of them being able to grow human ears on the back of rats and things, and I'm sure one day they'll figure out how to grow a penis on the back of a rat, and might end up having one of those. But for now, yeah, it is. It's just mostly just a tragedy that it can never be fixed.
Got it. Yeah, my brother, this is random, but it's applicable here. My brother is a doctor, and when he was in his residency program, he had to do a surgery rotation, and he sat in on a sex change.
Oh,
And I asked him, like, which one's easier? And his response was, well, it's easier to dig a hole than it is to plant a tree.
yes.
And I mean, yeah, it's fucking wild to see what we're able to do surgically now, and yet the limitations of the human body are where they're at currently as they stand. And for that, this is the current, status of your anatomy for now.
Yeah.
Yeah. What does healing look like?
Healing physically or emotionally, or
Emotionally, yeah, emotionally, the grief, the path forward, just the reconciliation with their body.
that has been quite the challenge. That was one of the main reasons that I was a part of that men's group that you and I were in, because I I wanted to be surrounded by other men. I never really was surrounded by other men that much. I mean, in my job I worked with other men, but I never had friends growing up. I was homeschooled my whole life. I lived out in the country. There was the occasional kid across the meadow that I'd go riding dirt bikes with, but I never had male friends that I would hang out with. So I joined that men's group to try to heal this, to try to feel okay being, well, to feel like a man again, I guess, or to feel what that is to be a man, because I didn't really know. I lived my whole life believing myself to not be a man, believing that I was in the wrong body, even though I was living as a man
Mhm.
and driving my trucks and things. But I felt like joining a men's group like that would maybe allow me to connect more with being a man. And then I went on this men's retreat down in Arizona where I was around nothing but men, and they did some healing things and masculine restoration stuff that was really good for me and helped me to align more with being a man. But it's so tragic that it all happens after I no longer have the male genitalia, and so one of the biggest benefits in healing was my finally coming back to Jesus.
Mm.
I denied, like I said, I lived as an atheist for much of my life. After being raised Mormon and the Mormon God falling apart and me not being able to believe in that, I couldn't accept any kind of God after that. And especially not Jesus. I thought Jesus was just a man who walked the earth. Maybe he was a good man, but I didn't accept that he was the Savior or the Son of God or God Himself come to earth in the flesh. And so it was one night. My wife, she also did not believe in God or Jesus, but she had an experience one night in front of our fireplace where Jesus, like, literally visited her and rescued her. And she had such an amazing spiritual experience. And I'm standing there still unable to accept myself, but also really struggling with what to do with my life now, having done this thing to myself, having lost my male genitalia, living as a woman for all these years. And I wanted what she had when she found Jesus back in her life. And so I prayed and asked, Jesus, please show me your love for me because I just wanted to feel his love. I wanted to feel that I was worth something because I felt worthless as a human. Like I destroyed myself. How can I go on living?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, I too had this experience where I felt like he came to me and wrapped me in his arms and he took me on this whole journey and showed me like my whole life, showed me that he was there watching and with me all along, even in the times I didn't believe, and that he was a loving father that was patient. And even though I made horrid mistakes, did horrid things to my body, that he forgave me and still loved me and was still there for me. And that has been incredibly healing. Gave me a sense of purpose and belonging, having gone down the path I did and done to myself what I did.
Mm-hmm. When was that?
That was early last year, so almost a year ago. It was right before I left the men's group. It was that was one of the reasons because I realized that for one, I was going to start going to church with my wife on Sundays, and we became a part of this really good small house church that's a non-denominational, non-corporate church, about the only kind of church I could accept.
Mm-hmm.
And it was happening on Sundays at the same time the men's group was going on. And I had this recognition that the men's group very, wasn't exactly Christian in belief and nature, and it just didn't feel like it aligned anymore. So that was why I backed out.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah. We were sad to watch you go, but you got to live your mission and your purpose and you know, your truth. So I'm at
Yeah,
the end of the day just still glad to be connected with you and know you and hear your story and just support you in whatever healing that looks like.
yeah.
For this episode that reaches people, whether they're in your shoes at some point, whether it's, your 15-year-old self, your 30-year-old self, or your today-year-old self, um, what type of questions would you be asking yourself? Well, let's say pre-transition. What type of questions would you be asking yourself to know if this is right for you?
I guess I'd be asking myself, well, what if these feelings are being driven by experiences you had when you were younger? And if that's the case, is this really something you should pursue? Should you be pursuing a permanent, life altering surgery in response to something that happened when you were younger, an experience you had? And I would really ask myself or someone experiencing these feelings, how do you know for sure that this is really who you are if even your political views can change a few months after you've developed such strong opinions about something, and then you get exposed to something else and you can shift those kind of beliefs? What's to make you believe that you might not also shift your belief of who you are?
Got it. Yeah. Very important, right? To look at the whether you want to call it mental health aspects or the event based belief formations before going down the biological or anatomical surgical fixes or changes. What about someone who is transitioned, who is questioning if this was the right decision, or where do I go from here if they know that they made a mistake?
I guess first of all, I would say regardless of what mistakes you may think you have made, you're still worthy and lovable as a human being. You're, I would say, while there are permanent changes that have been made to your body that can probably never be fixed, you can return to living how you were born. I I like I recognize that we were all born the way we were for a reason, and whether you believe in God or creator or not, even if you can only believe in a biological pattern that exists, that biological pattern is what caused you to be born as the sex you were born as. And this world has in place certain patterns that we don't get to make the rules on. And how we're born is one of them. And it's best to just recognize there is much greater happiness in just falling in line with what was meant to be. If you were born male, then that means continuing to live as a man, to live male the way you were born, because that was how God created you, how the biological pattern that existed created you, and that's okay. Anything that defies that was formed in experience and trauma, and therefore is not necessarily something that should continue.
Mhm.
It's okay to go back to the way you were born.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, wow. What a powerful story, Laurel, for you to come full circle on this and also be a beacon of light and of hope and of, trust for individuals who, have walked a similar path. Do you know offhand what the statistics are of the number of percentage wise of people who want to detransition?
They claim that it's less than 1% of of people who realize they made a mistake, but I'm part of some Facebook groups where I see that it is way, way higher of a percentage than just 1%. I'm not sure what the percentage actually is. It's hard to catalog or synthesize all of the data from what you see, but also there's certain school systems that used to say like one in every 10 students identified as trans. I, I think it was less than that. It's more like one in 50 or something. But then recently, because things have shifted, now they say only one in 200 or something like that. And so there's definitely been a decrease, which tells me that the majority of these kids who identify as trans was because of social contagion, because they were exposed to their friends who said it was cool, and they felt like this was an answer to why they were experiencing the anxiety and things they were. There was a huge increase in female to male transitioners where girls felt like they needed to be boys. And because of that, now there is a huge number of these poor young women who went on testosterone, and it lowered their voices and caused them to develop facial hair and body hair and everything. And now they are incredibly regretful. Once they came out of the delusion, the mental state that caused them to think they needed to do that to themselves, now they are so regretful. And there is a huge number of them, a huge number of these females who lived as males for a while, and a way, way higher percentage of them than men who decided to live as women or have or female surgeries.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm not exactly sure on the percentage of how many actually regret it, but I know it's way higher than the trans agenda or
Mhm.
media wants you to know.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember reading a study. I don't remember exactly where it is. Maybe I'll be able to find it before we post this. But apparently, Sweden has like the longest running study on transgender surgery, specifically hormone replacement. And it said something to the effect of when women, I think it was speaking specifically to women, when women go on testosterone replacement, TRT, to transition to male, it does something to their spine where it never like truly forms in it with like strength and integrity, and it leaves a lot of these women like in very poor health for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And I remember reading this somewhere as well, and I've seen this a couple different places that currently speaking, the transgender healthcare system, the transgender reassignment, and everything that goes along with it is a $300 million business, projected to be $1 billion business by 2030.
Oh wow.
And it's a very interesting thing of the the capital aspect of it, the monetary business side of this thing, and we're not even going to begin to touch or even attempt to scratch the surface on the recent mass shootings and the transgender, all that stuff. Like that's something interesting and fascinating to me as well. But I choose to stay very far away from that part of the news, so I could not speak on it even minutely with any bit of intellect. So yeah, I guess I share all this to say thank you for sharing your side of the story and your version of this walk, because this is not a common conversation that we have. And so I just
Uh,
appreciate your willingness.
yeah, I'm just very I went through what I went through for some reason. It's tragic, but I like to think that I can take my tragedy and hopefully turn it into hope for someone else or some wise words that may cause someone to second guess what they may be pursuing. And I have had numerous people reach out to me through my YouTube videos. People email me fairly frequently and tell me that because of my videos, they decided not to continue or that they realized that they were living a lie and that they needed to return to living as the man they were born as. And they want my help in walking them through detransition and how to present it to their wife that they're going to be living as a man again. And we have actually made pretty good friends with the parents of another trans person that there's a young man that lives here in Colorado Springs and his parents live in Tennessee and their son sprung on them just last year that he believes himself to be a woman trapped in a man's body and that he needs to transition. And it rocked their world. So they started researching online and came across my YouTube videos and then sent me an email message. And then we started emailing back and forth. And then when they came out here to visit their son, they met up with me and my wife, and we got to know them really well. Now we've become good friends with them, and they come to our house for dinner now and then, and they take us out to dinner some of the times they're here. And it's just really incredible to these connections that have been made through this whole thing as I'm able to help these parents to cope with their son thinking he's a woman and helping them, trying to give them some comfort, knowing that your son is very likely in about 6 or 7 years, probably tragically after he makes permanent changes to his body, but you are probably going to get him back.
Hmm.
And trying to give them that hope, but also trying to help them perhaps say the right things to him, given my experience that may help bring him back sooner.
Mm-hmm. Wow. It's a cliche statement, but when people are like, "You're doing God's work," you're doing God's work. So thank you for the commitment you've made to help people at least find their own way, not have advice for them, but just help guide them along the path. Really cool.
Yeah.
So, a
Yeah, because
couple. Go ahead.
I have no hatred towards anybody. Trans people, I love them. They're human beings that just happen to perhaps be confused about who they are.
Yeah, yeah. A couple questions, and we'll wrap up. Um, if you had a message to share with the world, what would it be?
Love yourself as God would love you, to love your neighbor, to do do good deeds in every way you can to your fellow man, to hold no unkind thought towards any other human. And yeah.
Great. Yeah, be love is what I heard. Or the other one was you're perfect as you are. Um, what advice would you have for your 20-year-old self?
uh, Stay away from the porn.
Mm, good answer. I quit watching porn last year and I've held true to that one. And I was talking about it to someone today, this woman, and she was just thanking me for that commitment. And I tell people I think porn is the first thing to quit. I think it is the most nefarious thing on the planet, more than any drug or substance. It is a very toxic thing.
It very much is. Yeah, and I didn't get into that during our interview, but how the porn very much played a role in my whole trans experience, and I know it does in most other trans identifying individuals.
Yeah. I could see that. Um, what what thread are you pulling on lately?
It's a good question. I guess I guess lately what what it means to really be a believer. And yeah,
I like that. We need more God in the world these days, I feel like.
yes,
I really do. I think that is what we're all being called back to is connection to God. And whatever God you want to call it, I don't care if you ascribe to it a religion or a spiritual anything, just something bigger than yourself. So I can resonate with that one deeply.
exactly. Because when we identify too much with the self as if we are God ourselves or whatever, it just it's not a fun or safe feeling place to be.
Yeah.
And it can cause a lot of bad.
Yeah. No, I agree. I feel like the devil is separation and, when I'm over here and you're over there, evil's won. So, yeah, God is key right now. Last
Yeah.
question. What does it mean to be human?
I guess going along with what I said before about loving each other, being a human is to recognize that we are all brothers and sisters on this planet. We're all sharing this space, and the best possible thing we can do is to just be love each other. And I love being a human, but part of being a human is having human connection, being connected to other humans. Otherwise, it's just not being a human. Being a human is being together with other humans and loving other humans.
Mm, yeah, I love that. Pack animals. Can't do this alone.
Yes.
Yeah. LaRell, where can people find out more about you, what you're up to, maybe reach out? What's the best way to get into your world?
Probably the best way is through my YouTube channel, youtube.com/the LaRell, TheLarell. And my email address is on there. That's how most people end up emailing me. And that's where I like to send most people. I haven't posted many new videos recently because I've, I guess I've been really busy and had a lot going on. But yeah, I want to post a lot more as I gather my thoughts more.
Great. Well, we'll direct people there in the comments. And again, I just really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your story and standing in your truth and helping others find theirs.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time and asking the questions.
It's been a pleasure, man. It's really good to connect again.
Yes.
Amazing. And thank you to the audience for your time and attention and presence here with LaRell and I today. I will drop all the connection information for LaRell in the caption. And until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep following the common thread. Thanks, y'all.
It's a trust fall, baby, be in the